I knew it was close. I thought it was very close, too close. But I said, rather than say, no, I don't want to do that, I said, Sergio, where are you going to be?
He's the man who defined Hollywood toughness, the face of spaghetti westerns and gritty cop thrillers. At 95 years old, Clint Eastwood has nothing left to prove. But now, with nearly 7 decades in the business, Eastwood isn't holding back anymore. For the first time, he's opening up about the actors he couldn't stand.
Was something like a John Wayne a big deal or not really?
Yeah, I met John Wayne. Actually, he came to a tennis tournament that I put on in Pebble Beach. And his wife was a big
But you were a star by that point.
Yeah, I had been playing in films.
And the stories behind those rivalries are as shocking as the movies themselves. Clint Eastwood is more than an actor. He's a symbol. From his breakthrough role in Sergio Leone's Dollars trilogy to his unforgettable turn as Dirty Harry, Eastwood has been etched into cinema history as the embodiment of grit, silence, and authority. And beyond acting, he built a second legacy as an Academy Award-winning director, proving he could master both sides of the camera. But even legends have enemies. Hollywood is built on egos, rivalries, and clashes behind the scenes.
So you are, just in case you forgot, you're 89 years old. When are you turning 90? What's your birthday?
I don't think I'll ever tell anybody.
Really?
It's May 31st.
All right, well, you just did. May 31st.
In case you were going to give me some swag or something.
For Clint Eastwood, a man known for his stoicism and independence, those clashes sometimes became explosive. While he rarely spoke about them at the height of his fame, age has a way of stripping away restraint. At 95, Eastwood has been reflecting on the actors he worked with. And not all of them left good memories. So who are the actors Clint Eastwood admitted he hated working with? And what really happened behind the scenes of Hollywood's golden age? To answer that, we need to rewind to the beginning of his rise and the rivalries that shaped his career. Clint Eastwood never fit neatly into the Hollywood system. In the 1950s, he began as a contract actor, but he quickly learned he hated being controlled by studios. He was tall, striking, but also soft-spoken, something that directors initially saw as a weakness. Eastwood turned it into his greatest strength. When Sergio Leone cast him in the spaghetti western A Fistful of Dollars in 1964, everything changed. Eastwood's quiet intensity became his trademark. While other actors filled the screen with speeches and theatrics, Eastwood did the opposite. He said little, moved slowly, and let his presence do the talking. But this lone wolf style didn't just stay on screen. Behind the scenes, Clint was fiercely independent. He wanted control, he hated interference, and he despised actors who wasted time with ego-driven behavior. To Clint, the set was about discipline, focus, and results. And that set the stage for some of his most infamous clashes. The first came during his spaghetti western days, when he found himself butting heads with actors who didn't respect his method. Clint Eastwood wasn't there to make friends. He was there to make history. But how did those rivalries first emerge in the rugged world of 1960s westerns? One of Clint Eastwood's earliest and most famous clashes wasn't with a fellow actor, but with a director, Sergio Leone. Leone gave Eastwood his international break, but their relationship was tense from the very beginning. Eastwood hated Leone's habit of endless takes. Clint believed in efficiency, get the shot, move on. Leone, on the other hand, demanded perfection and often pushed actors through dozens of takes to capture the exact moment he envisioned. For Clint, it felt like torture. The friction didn't end there. After the massive success of the Dollars trilogy, Leone publicly criticized Eastwood, calling him a limited actor. Clint, in turn, never forgave him for the comment. Though they owed each other their careers, the two men ended on bad terms. This early feud shaped Clint's approach for the rest of his life. From that point forward, he swore he would direct films his way. Fast, efficient, and with total respect for the actor's time. And while Leone wasn't an actor, this clash revealed the side of Eastwood that would define his future rivalries. Zero tolerance for arrogance, inefficiency, or disrespect. So when Clint began sharing sets with actors who brought big egos and little discipline, the fireworks were inevitable. But who were the stars that pushed him to his breaking point? As Clint Eastwood's career skyrocketed in the 1970s, he found himself working alongside some of Hollywood's biggest names. But the higher the stakes, the bigger the egos. And Clint had little patience for actors who didn't share his dedication to discipline. One notorious clash came during the filming of Paint Your Wagon in 1969, a musical western that paired Eastwood with Lee Marvin. The project was already unusual for Clint, who was far more comfortable with a revolver than with singing. Marvin, meanwhile, was known for his heavy drinking and unpredictable behavior. On set, Marvin's wild lifestyle clashed with Eastwood's focused, no-nonsense approach. Clint later admitted the experience left a bitter taste, saying he hated the chaos Marvin brought to the production. Another actor Clint famously clashed with was Richard Burton. Known for his Shakespearean grandeur and volatile personality, Burton and Eastwood were polar opposites. When they starred together in Where Eagles Dare in 1968, the tension was palpable. Burton's heavy drinking and larger-than-life persona irritated Clint, who preferred a quieter, more efficient working environment. Though the movie became a classic war film, Clint never looked back fondly on the partnership. These clashes weren't just about personal dislike. They highlighted the growing divide between Eastwood and the Hollywood system. While many actors embraced excess and ego, Clint valued professionalism, restraint, and authenticity. And those values would be put to the test again in the role that defined him. Dirty Harry. But behind the success of the film that turned him into a cultural icon was a brewing storm of drama, politics, and clashing personalities. Who exactly pushed Clint to his limits on the set of Dirty Harry? By the early 1970s, Clint Eastwood was no longer just a Western star. He was the face of a new kind of anti-hero. Dirty Harry introduced audiences to Harry Callahan, a cop who bent the rules to deliver justice. The role became a cultural phenomenon, but the production was anything but smooth. Clint was fiercely protective of the character, but not everyone shared his vision. He reportedly clashed with actors and even studio executives who wanted to soften Harry's edges, worried the character was too violent or too controversial. Clint refused to compromise. To him, Harry Callahan wasn't meant to be likable. He was meant to reflect the raw frustrations of a society grappling with crime and corruption. The tension extended to his co-stars as well. Some actors disliked Clint's efficiency, accusing him of rushing through scenes without giving them the time they wanted. Clint, however, saw their complaints as indulgent. He believed acting wasn't about endless rehearsals or grandstanding. It was about capturing truth in the moment. This divide created a hostile environment on set, where Clint often kept his distance from others. To him, the work came first. Friendships and camaraderie were secondary. It was during Dirty Harry that Clint's reputation as a loner in Hollywood solidified. The movie's success silenced his critics, but it also reinforced Clint's belief that he didn't need to get along with everyone. He just needed to get the job done. Yet the friction he faced on Dirty Harry was nothing compared to the battles that awaited him as he transitioned into directing. Because once Clint sat in the director's chair, the power dynamics shifted, and his tolerance for difficult actors reached its breaking point. When Clint Eastwood transitioned from actor to director, he finally gained what he had wanted for years: control. With movies like Play Misty for Me, 1971, Unforgiven, 1992, and $1 Million Baby, 2004, Clint proved that he wasn't just a leading man. He was a filmmaker with vision, but control also meant he had the power to decide who he would, and would not, work with again. Eastwood's directing style became famous for its speed and efficiency. While other directors shot dozens of takes, Clint preferred one or two. He expected his cast to show up prepared, deliver their lines, and trust their instincts. For disciplined actors, this was refreshing. For those who thrived on long rehearsals and endless improvisations, it was torture. One of the clearest examples of this clash came during the Iger Sanction, 1975. Clint starred in and directed the film, but he reportedly grew frustrated with some of the supporting cast who didn't share his disciplined approach. Though Clint rarely named names publicly, insiders said he quietly blacklisted actors who wasted time or brought ego onto his set. To Clint, respect for the craft meant respect for efficiency, and anyone who couldn't meet that standard wasn't invited back. This philosophy extended into his later career. By the time he directed Unforgiven, Eastwood was one of Hollywood's most powerful figures, and actors knew better than to cross him. If you wasted Clint's time, there was no second chance. His films were filled with recurring collaborators, people he trusted, people who understood his rhythm. For Clint, loyalty mattered, but professionalism mattered even more. The actors he refused to work with again weren't always publicized, but within Hollywood, his reputation was clear. Cross Clint Eastwood, and your chances of ever stepping onto his set again were slim to none. But Clint's clashes weren't limited to film sets. As his fame grew, so did his voice, and his willingness to step into public debates. And in Hollywood, politics can create enemies just as quickly as bad behavior. Clint Eastwood has never been shy about speaking his mind. From the 1970s onward, he built a reputation not only as an actor and director, but also as a fiercely independent thinker. While much of Hollywood leaned one way politically, Clint often went the other. And that made him a polarizing figure. In the 1970s, when films like Dirty Harry became cultural lightning rods, Clint faced criticism from actors and activists who saw the character as promoting fascist ideas of justice. Some actors refused to work with him, believing his roles glamorized violence and undermined social progress. Clint brushed it off, famously saying he didn't make movies to be politically correct. He made movies to tell stories. But the divide deepened in later years. Clint's outspoken views, particularly during his time as mayor of Carmel in the 1980s, and his later political endorsements, created tensions with Hollywood colleagues. For Clint, independence was everything, but in a town built on alliances, his refusal to play the political game earned him enemies. One infamous moment came at the 2012 Republican National Convention when Clint delivered his now legendary empty chair speech. The unusual performance sparked ridicule from actors and comedians across Hollywood. While some admired his boldness, others saw it as a sign that Clint was out of touch. The backlash strained relationships and reminded everyone that even legends aren't immune to ridicule. Through it all, Clint never wavered. He believed that standing by his principles mattered more than keeping friends in Hollywood. But his public feuds showed just how isolating that independence could be. For a man who already kept his distance from fellow actors, politics became yet another wedge that separated him from many of his peers. Still, Clint's greatest rivalries weren't always about politics. Some were deeply personal, born from creative differences and clashes of personality that would follow him for decades. The question is, which actors left scars that Clint still remembers at 95? Hollywood is a place where grudges can last a lifetime, and Clint Eastwood was no stranger to rivalries that refused to fade. While some of his clashes were professional, others became deeply personal, scars that lingered long after the cameras stopped rolling. One of Clint's most notable rivalries was with Kevin Costner. The two worked together on A Perfect World, 1993, a film directed by Eastwood with Costner in the lead role. The movie received critical praise, but behind the scenes, tension brewed. Costner, fresh off the success of Dances with Wolves, carried the confidence of an Oscar-winning director and star. Clint, on the other hand, had his own decades of experience and wasn't about to take advice from someone he saw as younger and less seasoned. Though they completed the project professionally, insiders reported that Clint found Costner's approach frustrating and ego-driven. The respect between them was thin, and while the film remains a gem in Eastwood's directing catalog, the collaboration left Clint with little desire to work with Costner again. Another difficult relationship was with Gene Hackman. Hackman, known for his explosive temper and intensity, was cast in Eastwood's Unforgiven, a movie that would go on to win multiple Academy Awards, including Best Picture. But Hackman's fiery personality clashed with Clint's calm, minimalist directing style. Though the movie was a triumph, the two men reportedly kept their distance once filming wrapped. These personal rivalries weren't always about who was right or wrong. They were about chemistry, or the lack of it. Clint Eastwood valued discipline, humility, and trust. When he felt those qualities were missing, the bond was broken, sometimes permanently. And at 95, when he reflects on his career, it's these strained relationships that stand out as the most difficult chapters. But if some actors landed permanently on Clint's bad side, others earned his lifelong respect. And understanding who Clint admired makes his rivalries even more striking. To understand the actors Clint Eastwood hated working with, it's just as important to look at the ones he admired, because the contrast reveals exactly what mattered to him and what didn't. One of Clint's most cherished collaborators was Morgan Freeman. The two worked together on Unforgiven and later reunited for $1 Million Baby. Freeman's calm professionalism, his respect for the process, and his ability to deliver powerful performances with subtlety made him one of Clint's favorites. Freeman embodied everything Clint valued: discipline, humility, and talent without ego. Another actor Clint held in high regard was Hilary Swank, whose role in $1 Million Baby earned her an Academy Award. Clint admired her relentless work ethic and commitment to the role, often describing her as one of the most dedicated performers he had ever directed. For Clint, it wasn't about fame or accolades. It was about showing up, doing the work, and respecting the story. He also had deep respect for actors like Matt Damon, who starred in Invictus, and Bradley Cooper, who worked with Clint on American Sniper. Both brought a quiet professionalism to their roles that aligned perfectly with Clint's style. The respect Clint showed these actors highlights why his rivalries mattered so much. It wasn't about personality clashes for the sake of drama. It was about whether someone shared his philosophy: work hard, stay humble, and let the story come first. And yet, even with those he respected, Clint never lost sight of his independence. Admiration didn't mean friendship, it meant trust. And for Clint, trust was everything. But as Eastwood entered the twilight of his career, the question became unavoidable. How does a man who built his life on grudges, rivalries, and discipline look back on it all at 95? At 95 years old, Clint Eastwood has nothing left to prove. He's won Oscars, he's made classics, and he's cemented his place in Hollywood history. Yet what fascinates fans most is not just the movies he made, but the grudges he carried, and whether time has softened his stance. In interviews, Clint has admitted that he doesn't dwell on the past, but those who know him say he has a long memory. The actors who wasted time, who disrespected the process, or who carried egos too big for their talent, Clint never forgot. And even decades later, their names still surface when he reflects on the frustrations of his career. But here's the twist. At his age, Clint has also shown signs of forgiveness. He has spoken warmly of people he once clashed with, acknowledging that life is too short to carry bitterness forever. While he still openly admits there were actors he hated working with, he also recognizes that those conflicts shaped him, taught him, and made him the filmmaker he became. And perhaps that's the ultimate legacy of Clint Eastwood's rivalries. They weren't just grudges, they were lessons. Each clash, each difficult partnership, reinforced his commitment to efficiency, humility, and independence. They defined his approach, and they defined his career. So at 95, does Clint look back with anger or with peace? The answer seems to be both. He hasn't forgotten who frustrated him, but he's also found a way to turn those frustrations into fuel for his art. And in Hollywood, maybe that's the best revenge. Clint Eastwood's story is one of triumph, but also of cost. To build a career as long and successful as his, sacrifices had to be made, and often those sacrifices came in the form of relationships. Being fiercely independent made Clint one of the most unique voices in film, but it also made him isolated. He was respected, even revered, but not always liked. His refusal to tolerate arrogance or inefficiency meant he built fewer friendships in Hollywood than most actors of his stature. While others cultivated networks, Clint relied on himself. This independence also affected his personal life. His relationships, marriages, and family dynamics were often turbulent. The same no-nonsense approach he brought to the set sometimes made him distant at home. At 95, he has built a towering legacy, but the cost of that legacy is written in the rivalries, breakups, and estrangements he leaves behind. And yet, that's what makes Clint Eastwood's story so compelling. He never tried to be everything to everyone. He never chased popularity or softened his edges to please others. He chose discipline, control, and independence, even when it meant carrying grudges that lasted decades. That's the price of being Clint Eastwood. It's the story of a man who built an empire his way, but not without enemies. So, at 95, what does Clint Eastwood really think about the actors he hated the most? His reflections reveal a man who valued discipline above all else, who admired humility and despised arrogance. His grudges weren't about petty jealousy, they were about respect, or the lack of it. And that's the lesson hidden in his story. Even the toughest legends are shaped by the people they clash with. Even Clint Eastwood, the man with no name, the face of Dirty Harry, the Academy Award-winning director, was defined not only by the roles he played, but by the battles he fought off-screen. His legacy is a reminder that greatness doesn't mean perfection. It means staying true to your principles, even when it makes you enemies. And in Clint's case, that honesty is what has kept him timeless. So, what do you think? Was Clint Eastwood right to carry those grudges? Or should he have let them go? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more untold stories of Hollywood's most iconic legends. Because sometimes the greatest drama isn't on the screen, it's behind the scenes.